Several of the exercises presented in this curriculum have been designed with polyvagal theory and the stress response system in mind. In this video lesson, we will discuss the stress response system and how it interacts with the social engagement system when danger is sensed in the environment. According to polyvagal theory, there are 3 levels of the stress response system. There is an inverse relationship between stress and the sophistication of a response. That means as stress increases, our responses become increasingly primitive and more resemble a child or a pet. A young child reacts to stress differently than a grown adult in most situations. But if the stress level becomes too intense, an adult's response will resemble that of a child. The first level of the stress response system is the social engagement system. It's characterized by asking for help and processing thoughts and emotions with others. In this stage of stress response, we can observe pro-social behaviors such as utilizing and reading facial expressions and listening. The second level is mobilization, or the fight or flight response. At this level, an individual loses his or her ability to read the environment or verbally process the experience. They will instead begin to engage in autonomic behaviors such as running, hiding, or fighting. The lowest level of the stress processing is immobilization, where the mind and body begin to shut down to save resources. Immobilization often looks like fainting or passing out. According to the theory, when the autonomic nervous system detects safety, it promotes pro-social behaviors such as talking and the ability to read body language and expressions of others. However, when the system senses danger, this ability goes away and the individual attempts to find a place of safety. The system works without conscious control, so for many, they may find themselves engaging in a behavior known to be dangerous without being able to stop themselves. When the individuals describe this phenomenon, they often indicate a sense of detachment, that they are aware of what they're doing, recognize it to be wrong, but can't stop. Here's a way to think about the different levels of the stress response system. If you and your friends are on a road trip and get into a car accident, there will likely be some people that remain present, call 911, and help the other people in the car. There will probably be someone who is screaming, running around, crying, and inconsolable. And there will probably be someone who has fainted. These are the 3 levels of the stress response system. Now that you've learned something about how we respond to stress, let's put your knowledge to work. This is Amy. Say hi, Amy. Amy had been sober for 3 months. She had a job, was going to AA meetings, and working with her sponsor. As part of her service work, Amy was regularly heading back to the inpatient facility where she had initially gotten treatment to provide support to those who were struggling. One person she tried to help was not receptive. And when she visited this person, it made her feel kind of down. Amy kept going back to help this person without acknowledging her feelings or sharing them. She thought by continuously going back, she was doing what she was supposed to do, and it would get better on its own. She often spoke about how kind and caring the staff at the facility were to her, but never stopped to talk to them. Amy justified this by thinking, they're too busy or they won't remember me. One day she left the facility and took the bus to work. Upon arriving at work, she found out one of her shifts got cut. She began to worry about making less money. Amy complained to her friends, who agreed that the shift cut was wrong. They co-signed her belief that the world is unfair. Angry and resentful, Amy called her mother at the end of her shift and found out her dog is sick and might need to be put down. Amy was devastated and crying. A friend heard her crying and came to comfort her. Amy told her friend about her day and everything that happened. The next thing that they remember was driving in the car on the way to meet a drug dealer. So what happened to Amy? This one is a true story. Amy may not be her real name, but I worked with a girl who had the same story many years ago, earlier in my career while working in an inpatient treatment facility. Let's break down everything that happened to Amy and see if we can figure it out together. Now, there's a few points in the story where Amy could have made a change. Probably the first point in the story where a change could have made was when she was at the treatment center, right? What could she have done differently? What do you think? She could have come to talk to staff. That would have been me or anybody else that worked at the facility. In fact, many of the other girls that Amy lived with came back to help us and always stopped in to at least let us know that they had been there. When they did, we'd reinforce how much they'd changed and how far they'd come, regardless of their success helping our patients. What else do you think Amy could have done? Well, she was in recovery, right? And she had a sponsor. So she could have called her sponsor or any other support. She didn't do any of these things. Do you remember what she did do? She got on the bus and went to work. Now, was there something she could have done while she was on the bus? You bet there was. She could have read, she could have listened to music, meditated, prayed, engaged in some sort of a grounding activity. We call these types of activities internal coping strategies, things that you can do for yourself and by yourself without involving another person. She could have called the support as well while she was on the bus. She didn't do any of these things. What do you think she did do? What would you do? Well, I think that you probably would sit and stew, right? I call that stewing in your own shit. After that, Amy got to work and saw that her shifts were cut. Now, this story takes place in South Florida in June. And at that time of the year, most of the restaurants and service type work slows down because the snowbirds fly north for the winter. So shifts tend to get cut. And actually, Amy had pointed out to her boss that it was starting to slow down in her restaurant and he should cut some shifts. But that day when Amy got to work and she saw her shifts were cut, she forgot all about that. When she noticed this, what do you think she could have done? Well, if you thought talk to her boss, then you're on the right track. She also could have reached out to a support. She didn't. What did she do? She complained. What's complaining, you ask? It's just stewing in your own shit, just doing it verbally. After that, Amy finds out her dog is sick and ends up spending time with a quote-unquote friend. Now, I knew this friend, and she was no friend. This was someone who we had suspected as the staff was up to no good, and Amy knew to stay away from her. But in this moment, she couldn't see the danger of this person. In fact, this person suddenly became her friend. So there's this point in this story where Amy moves from her social engagement system into her fight or flight system. Can you see it? It's somewhere around the point where she found out her shifts were cut. Typically, Amy would arrive at work and feel connected to her coworkers, but that day she arrived and felt betrayed and disconnected because her shifts were being cut. Her complaining gave us a big clue because when we complain, we are looking for someone to confirm how we feel. We want to be seen. Our next clue is that she can't see the inherent danger of her quote-unquote friend, someone she knew was bad news, but suddenly looked like a support. Now, the big question here is, how could Amy have avoided all of this? What's the first trigger? Let's go back to the beginning. Amy gave a few reasons why she didn't want to talk to the staff, right? She was doing what she thought she was supposed to be doing and thought we would be disappointed in her because she felt like a failure. She thought that we as the staff were also going to be too busy and that we would not remember her. All of these are silly excuses, but she still believed them. Why? Because that's how her father treated her. Had she recognized this part sooner, she could have avoided all of this.